Good morning, nau mai, haere mai. Welcome councillors to our full council agenda for today, Tuesday the 27th of May. As usual, we've got a full agenda in front of us, and we've got Dave coming in online, so that's fantastic. So we will just start with our normal procedures. We have got typically we'd look for apologies, but just looking around the room, I think we've got everybody in attendance today. Our usual health and safety messaging for should we need to exit this building, out the door that you entered or the door to my left, and our assembly point is over by in the car park by the St John's building. As normal, councillors, we will start with our affirmation, which just gives us the time to clear our heads from our busy world that we live in outside of this room and this decision making, and consider what we have in front of us today. So we do pledge that we will faithfully and impartially use our skills, wisdom and judgment throughout the discussions and deliberations ahead of us today, in order to make responsible and appropriate decisions for the benefit of Whanganui District at large. We commit individually and as council to the principles of integrity and respect, and to upholding the values that we believe distinguish and enrich our district. Thank you. Councillors, you've all come prepared today and will have looked through and read the information in our agenda pack. Is there any conflicts of interest in regard to items that we're going to discuss today? Thank you.
We're declare a conflict of interest on PE item 8.4, and I will absent myself from the room.
That's fine, we will accept that. Thank you. Thanks, councillor, for that information. Any other conflicts noted? No, thank you. Our normal procedure, this meeting is being live streamed and being recorded.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Grant. Councillors, I just want to check in. We've received two separately circulated items. One is attached to item 5.3. The CWMS applications. Have you all received that information ahead of today? Thank you. And also item 7.6 around the road safety information. You will have received that, which is attached to Emma Feathery's report. Okay. And there, I'll discuss that perhaps when we go to public excluded that additional item as well as the Matthews Road, so we'll just hold that thought for the moment. So with that, councillors, you've got all the information you need to deliberate today, but is there any urgent business that we need to attend to as council this morning? Nothing? Thank you. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Madam, just a leave of absence request, and I've given the details to yourself and Graham. That is for Quiet July, but given that there'd been some talk around possibly using some of July, I thought it important to do that formally.
Yeah, I'll accept that formal acknowledgement of the dates, and the dates have been lodged with Graham. So can I please have a move in a seconder? Thank you, Karen. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Tom. That we approve that leave of absence. All in agreement to that, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Thank you. Sorry, Colleen, I missed your hand raising. Okay, councillors, I think we're now ready to look at the minutes we've got in front of us. We've actually got 3 sets of minutes that we need to attend to today. So if we begin with the minutes from the meeting that was scheduled on the 29th of April, we will do our usual page turn, and what we are looking for at this point is matters of accuracy. So page 4 and 5, 6 and 7. 9, 10, 11. Well, thank you, Ross.
Madam Mayor, just on top of page 13, my comment there on the second line, for the Wire community. I probably said Wire, but I meant Famuri, or it should have meant Famuri. Is that, change that to what I should have said, or what I actually said.
Yeah, I think the context of what you're recovering in these minutes is the community
Yeah,
per se,
Yeah.
as opposed to identifying
Yeah,
like
correct.
context.
Yeah.
Does that clear up for you?
Yep.
Yeah, everybody okay with that? Yeah, we're fine, thank you, Ross, for that.
thank you.
Okay, so if we carry on, page 13, page 14 and 15, 16 and 17. Yeah, 16, 17, sorry, just checking my own notes. Page 18 and 19, 20, 21, and the final page for those minutes is on page 22 of your agenda pack. Councillors, if there's no further alterations to those minutes, is someone willing to move and second that we accept those minutes as they're accurate? Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ross. All in agreement with that, please say aye. That's carried, thank you. And as per normal, we'll just work through those pages also to consider if there is any matters arising from those minutes. Just on page 5 there, Graham, I think we can go to Dan from LGZ. Did we get that? Schedule or not?
Not yet.
No, okay, so we'll leave that with you. Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you. Matters arising, page 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 15, 16, 17, I guess just, it's not really matters arising, but it's just a point that I noted in Mr. Jack Chisnell's deputation, and it was, I guess it's just important to consider that Jack thought it'd be feasible to start with 2 lawns and increase it to 4, and I just think we need to keep that in our line of sight of when we're considering options going forward. So I just want to raise that as a, keep it in our minds. Page 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 and 22. No further matters arising for those minutes. Thanks, councillors. That's great. We can tick those minutes off, which does take us through to page 23 in our agenda pack, and these are the council minutes from the meeting held on the 6th of May. So just looking for accuracy on those pages, page 23, 5. No matters of accuracy. Someone willing to move? Thank you. Karen, is that a moving or is that an
It
accuracy?
was actually not fast enough on page 23. Just under minutes, there's 3 letters there, DRQ, and I wonder if we needed them, or that's a draft, sort of a typo. Or something.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, thanks, Karen. So we've got Karen moving. Thank you, Fiona. To second those minutes, all in agreement that we receive them as true and accurate. Please say aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Matters arising from those minutes. If I can just inform you all at the top of page 25, it was suggested from that discussion with Bill and Serena around the ACC coverage in district. And so I have made contact with the district nurses and received their information and have written a letter and forwarded to Bill to lend our weight to his voice around provision of care, particularly in regard to ACC coverage across our district. So I just wanted you to know that that task has been completed. Thank you. So if there's no further matters arising to those minutes, if we now, this takes us to page 26, and this was our extraordinary council meeting, which was scheduled for Tuesday the 13th of May. And if we just work through those pages as normal, just looking for matters of accuracy, so page 26 and 27. 28 or 29. 30 and 31. Thirty-two and 33. 34 and 35. 36, 37. And page 38. Thank you, Robbie.
It's just the top of page 38, the bottom of the first paragraph, is a comment I made there. And it's, the last of it reads, you also know the decision to put council in a better position if there was a change of government next year. Really, we were saying there was a change of government direction. It's not necessarily a change of government. Change of direction.
Policy direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Is everybody comfortable with that as an alteration to those minutes? Thank you, Robbie, for that. So that, with that minor amendment to those minutes, is someone willing to move that we accept those minutes as true and accurate record? Tom, do I have a second for that? Thank you, Fiona. All in agreement that we receive those minutes as true and accurate, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, that's carried, thank you. And just by nature of doing our usual page turn to consider, I guess the whole meeting was around the preferred position or the deliberation and decision of our council. So is there any matters arising that councillors have in regard to those minutes in their entirety, really? No matters arising? Can I just ask, Hamish, you know, next steps, we're waiting, Kaikoura have their meeting tomorrow.
Yep.
And from your, you know, where do you believe the position will sit from here following that? Have you got any insights to that you can offer us?
Nothing concrete. I mean, we're doing some work on what standing up CCO will look like and how we'll do that. I've got a meeting with Will on, you know, the secretary we've got Thursday following their decision. So we're just proceeding as if it's going to happen. And obviously the first step is to get our joint water service delivery plan done, and we're trying to progress that as well. So,
yeah. Okay.
So we're sort of mapping out the steps.
Sure.
And I think we need to come to an agreement about how we're going to handle these things. Whether we want to set up a small group to try and drive it along, or how we're going to do that. But we'll work that out.
Thank
But
you.
I think probably what is clear that each subsequent decision will have to come back to council as a bundle of work, and each council will have to approve those subsequent decisions as we move forward. So figure out how we chunk that work out.
Yes, okay.
So you'll have to approve the water service delivery plan, for example.
Yes.
We'll have to approve it as well.
Yes.
Both chief executives will have to certify it.
Yes.
There's some natural chunks.
That's right. So yeah, there's certainly some steps that need to be followed, one foot after the other, really, as we work our gently through this process, so we don't get to, you know, unintended consequence, so to speak, you know, that we need to have our eyes open all the time. Sorry, Tom.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if we are chunking parts of this progress, is there any risk or jeopardy to the whole plan if our council or Kaikoura council don't agree with parts of that chunking? Is there any jeopardy there that may put the whole plan in jeopardy because of maybe not agreeing to certain parts of that?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, potentially we might have different views on something, and the question is whether we can reach a situation where we're not, I was going to say happy, but at least unhappy. And if we can't reach that situation, then obviously it's going to raise some questions.
It probably reminds me a lot of the formation of the CWMS in many ways, and Vince, you'll remember those days when it was not contentious, but you know, people were testing assumptions and opinions and facts, and you know, Winton always use the words gifting and gaining, and it feels like this will be the same sort of process. So those words have come back to me as you know, thinking about the past journeys we've all been on. But you know, those words sort of resonated with this next steps of as we work our way through this and find where are our greatest synergies and where are differences and where we find solutions with that. So I have confidence that we'll be able to do that with the relationship that exists within Kaikoura, but we're uncharted territories for certain. Yeah. Okay, happy to move on, councillors. Thank you for that discussion. Rightio, so let's just now look at our known council and just take these next few pages as we normally do. On page 39 is our forward work program. Not sure is there anything else that needs to be populated in those from the exec team. Standard at this point.
There will be a couple of decision items at the presentations meeting on the 3rd of June, two decision items.
Yes.
Okay, so that will be a fullish meeting day. We've got
Oh,
are we going?
one of them will be extremely quick and the other one will be reasonably quick.
Okay.
Good luck.
That's exciting for us.
Yeah.
Thank you. If we just look at the next couple of pages, I think I sent out the Kino the RMA. I received those notes and I sent them out to councillors because actually they were quite useful. I felt the session was quite useful considering what potentially is around the corner as far as AM, so RMA goes. So if you don't want to read it, you can push delete, but I think they were quite useful. And we still haven't secured a consideration of that Queen Mary Historic Hospital Reserve, so it's still in the pipeline.
Yes, ma'am, maybe we could try and just 5 minutes today at lunchtime.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. So with that, councillors, we've got those 3 pages. We just need to move that we receive that information. Is someone happy to do that? Thanks, Pauline. Thank you, Tom. That we receive that information, all in agreement to that, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. So that gets us through all of the formative information on our agenda today, and you will be aware we've got 2 decision items, and our first decision item is the private road naming for the Amberley Retirement Village. Welcome, Terry. We don't normally see you around this table, but I understand that Scott's not able to be with us today, so I'm aware, as South Ward councillors will be, that this has been passed to South Ward for their scrutiny, but happy to receive your input, Terry, to talk us through this, and then we'll consider the recommendation as it's presented to councillors. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the chair, morning everyone. Just a bit of background. The road naming report, council granted a resource consent for a establishment of a retirement village at 10 Teviot and 175 Carters Road. The applicant is currently seeking to name 2 of the 8 private roads that are there, with 6 previously being named. Road X on the Appendix 2 has been suggested for McEwen Crescent. This is in homage to Mr. Gordon McEwen, who is a blacksmith at Arthur Burke's for much of his time. The second one is Road Y, which has been suggested to be called Lodge Lane. This is in homage to Helen Lodge, who has been an active volunteer within the Amberley community. She currently resides in the village and has given permission for her name to be used for this. Given this sort of background, the officer recommendation is that the road name be called McEwen Crescent for Street X and Lodge Lane for Street Y, as on the Appendix 2 scheme plan.
Thanks, Terry. That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm just going to check on with the South Ward councillors because there was some discussion at South Ward around getting the X and the Y in the right place. So is it correct as we see it in front of us
I
today?
believe it is.
Yeah, okay, I think so too, but I was just double checking. Yeah.
They were fixed and rectified.
Good on you, that's awesome, I just didn't want to have X and Y in the wrong place, that's all. So, I'm looking for direction from South Ward councillors, you've had discussion at the local level around this, and but happy to receive information from other councillors of the paper that's in front of us as well. Thank you, Ross.
Madam Mayor, Chair, just a question regarding Street Y and it carrying on or right through the Ellsworth Avenue, rather than just being Short Street, and I had a site visit to see that, but that has a logical way of doing it, rather than that stopping at where the school present comes off.
Through the street, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
if you notice, councillor, here's the avenue, goes round the corner and it bends at the bottom there, so
Yes.
the avenue carries on beyond there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right round,
Okay, so
right through actually.
you haven't had a good track record.
No, and the one thing we don't want to be going back and having one road and three names, so I guess having Street Y coming from the T intersection of Street X to that sort of Y intersection, I guess, with Isla makes sort of sense, doesn't it really?
Yeah, so it is a definite bend in Esler Street, so it's, it's not a straight through.
It's not straight to this.
Yeah.
definitely.
No, that's good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good question, though, thank you. Any other questions from councillors, just to clarify the paper in front of us? Okay.
Not so much a question as a comment that came out of the discussion at South Ward. Some names around the district carry a lot of mana, and you can only use them once. In this case, Browns Bridge, for example, is what Andy was called before Andy was here. So, you sort of think, well, what do you use it for? And another example, which I remember the RSA bring up with me, we've got Sir Charles Upham, and I think just make mention VC after his name, strictly speaking. We've used that name in a little lane at the back of Amity somewhere, and it sort of seemed to me to be a shame that we didn't, it wasn't an avenue or something a bit more significant, So it was just something I think to bear in mind going forward, is that we're just a wee bit careful how we use, the handful of names that probably are feeling a little bit more significant in the entire district than perhaps just a local person in a local district.
Yeah, just to sort of tease out your point a wee bit, Robbie. Terry, can you just describe to us how the names, how that process starts? I mean, we're at the end of this process, but how does it actually start? So the subdivision is established, and who actually, how does that first conversation happen around road naming? Just so that Robbie or we get an understanding.
So when once the subdivision is complete and the road naming starts as part of the section 223, 224 process, they submit 3 suggested names. That comes to us as the planning team. We evaluate those names, make recommendations around whether they can or can work. Once the 3 names are then there with good reasons, we bring the report to council, either before the sub-board or after the board, and then that is how it reaches the table where we are now.
So yeah, there is some input at the start, and then it flows through. But I guess what you're considering is that the value of some names within the district hold not a greater presence, but yeah, that's the theme, I guess, behind what you're talking about. Yeah, so thank you for the explanation, appreciate that. Pauline?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to point out, I'm sure that people were aware that, for both of these roads, the South Ward has gone with the officer recommendation, and they are the second choice names. And Robbie mentioned the Road X, the original request was Browns Bridge, and it was suggested to be avoided because of Mount Brown Road. And I did raise it at South Ward that actually I did feel that they were quite different. Given that and what Robbie's just said about Browns Bridge and the mana, I guess, it would seem to me that if we've used that thinking that we weren't going to use Brown's Bridge because it was too similar to Mount Brown, that it would almost eliminate that as a name moving forward. And I'm pretty concerned about that because I actually don't think they're that similar. It's quite different between, you know, Turner's Road and Turner's Lane, absolutely. But Brown's Bridge and Mount Brown is quite, yeah, given that they had a different ending. But anyway, that said, I just wanted to put that out there and that, you know, are we actually precluding ourselves from using Brown's Bridge, you know, in the future? But that said, it has gone through Southwood. You know, it was well supported, it was well discussed. And so on that basis, I am happy to move the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Pauline, and thank you for bringing the discussion of the community through to this table as well, because all of those points were raised. And, you know, I guess we can all think about different parts of our district. There are, you know, there's Princess Street and there's, you know, there's a whole lot of streets that have got similarities. So anyway, this is the issue we have in front of us. We have a recommendation from our officers. It has worked through the process and through the community of South Ward, and I'll accept your recommendation to move that. Thank you, Pauline. Do I have a second before that? I'll go with Robbie actually. Thank you, just for a bit of local flavour. Thank you. So Pauline and Robbie moved and seconded. Or if there's no further discussion or all in agreement, aye. Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Terry. Good to see you. Thank you. So that takes us now to page 50, which is the Hurunui Tourism Board membership. You have written this paper, having consulted with Karen. So maybe if you just talk us through this and then we'll have a discussion about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the Hurunui Tourism Board has various times considered what structure is appropriate to move forward with, and in particular in relation to two matters really. Firstly, delivery of the Destination Management Plan, which is something that's relatively new for the Tourism Board, and it's Tourism Board has, I guess, worked its way through development of the Destination Management Plan, and look to see how that can be best delivered in the future, and also to look at issues of perception of conflict of interest or bias, particularly in relation to Cannon Springs with the role of the pool staff play in supporting Hurunui tourism. So those are the sort of issues that it's been looking at, and also at times it has felt like there is councillor overload, if I can call it that, on that particular committee. So after working through this and workshop, the board has recommended passed a resolution to recommend a change to the incoming council, that in the new training, the composition of the board membership changes. And this paper is asking you as council to endorse that, so when it goes to the new council. So currently, the board consists of the mayor, 3 councillors, and 5 independent members, who are a member of the Cannon Springs Thermal Pools and Spa Committee, member of North Canterbury Wine Growers, a member of the Cannon Springs Business Association, a member of Amberley NZ, and 1 independent member that isn't there by dint of their position in another organisation. And what the committee is recommending that in the new training, the committee is constituted of the mayor, 1 councillor, and 7 independents. So the named independents as previously, but 3 true independents on that committee. So that's the recommendation. These roles aren't remunerated roles, so there's no financial cost to that change. And of course, this is simply your recommendation to the incoming council, who your endorsement of the tourism board recommendation to the incoming council, and the incoming council will make its own decision on the makeup or existence of committees. So I shall leave it there, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, that's fine, just see Ross's hand.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Particularly having 7 independent members, and I see there's one currently vacant at the moment, so having 2 more there. Is that vacancy that's already there, because it's been hard to fill? What I'm getting at is, will it be hard to fill those roles?
So that vacancy is there because we haven't attempted to fill it at this stage.
But do you envisage, having more roles to fill, that they'll be able to be filled by the right people?
Well, the board has been working on some specifications for what it's looking for in its members, in those independent members. I don't know until I go to market how difficult it will be to fill those roles. We have filled independent roles on the board before and found good candidates for that. So yeah, but we'll just depend on the market at the time, I guess.
Because there'll be no remuneration for those. Thank you.
Well, unless the new council decides to remunerate. I mean, this is simply a recommendation to the council.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Through the chair, in response to your question, Ross, there's been a lot of discussion around the direction of the board moving forward, and I think the position that we're looking at filling at the moment is there's a desire for it to reflect very much the destination management plan from an economic perspective. Whether or not we actually get somebody that's got that sort of lens, but it's more about trying to find a person who's possibly vested in the district and also can understand the very strong correlation between economic development and tourism. So kind of whether that means that's what we'll get, but that's kind of the lens that we were approaching it with.
Thanks, Barry.
I want to thank you, Hamish, for the report and for outlining, as you have, the context here, and certainly want to speak, really strongly in favour of this. The board has been on a journey as we've, I guess, pivoted from the more marketing kind of and promotion style of tourism in the past, and as you know, tourism is largely funded by the targeted tourism rate, and a lot of that emanates therefore from Hanna Springs. And I think the board has, as begun to embed more the new destination management focus, which has to have a broader focus, not just on promotion, but also on managing the destination. So giving consideration to the communities and the district as a whole, and making sure that we have the calibration right, I guess, between attracting more visitation and making sure it's kind of the nature and extent of visitation that the community is able and willing to support, if that makes sense. So there has been a real journey by the board, and I think the board felt it was timely to review its own structure and composition as well as part of adjusting to the new focus in destination management. Of course, we are like all other regional tourism operators throughout the country. We're in the same position of grappling with this. We have a destination management plan, and we don't have the funding, the government didn't grant the funding to assist with the implementation. So we're just trying to make sure that our calibration is set to continue delivering what our destination management plan requires. So yes, as Hamish said, the Committee of Council is an unusual setup for a regional tourism operator to have its destination management run. The majority of them are more trusts or CCOs, and some of those CCOs also incorporate the Economic Development Agency side of things, whereas of course ours sits separately with Enterprise North Canterbury at present. So this really is a way of addressing a sort of a balancing of the board to reflect some key roles, and I think Hamish has outlined those with you know, the wine growers, Ambly NZ, Hamlets Friends Business Association and so on. But just to pull back slightly the number of what the board feels is currently a disproportionately high number of elected members, and get some more truly independent members that have more of an economic development, as you say, Vanessa, and tourism sector knowledge and expertise that they can bring, so that we've got hopefully a good mix of people around the table. And so I wanted to speak in support of this. It was a unanimous recommendation from the board, and we do of course require council's support of that in order to set this up for the next triennium. And we are carrying one vacancy at the moment, but it kind of makes sense to do perhaps to do a promotion or a seeking, going to the market, as Hamish says, for 3 roles rather than just 1, and then in a few months 2 more, if that's what the council were to agree. So look, I'm really happy to take any questions on this, but I certainly support this recommendation.
Thanks, Karen, and for that, I guess, taking us on that journey as well, you know, so thank you for that. Tom, you have a question?
Madam Chair, the 3 independent members, will they be appointed by us, the council, or will they be appointed by the?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, the council will appoint those 3 independent members. So originally, officers will do a search, come up with some recommendations, and council will appoint or not, and that will be up to the new council, of course.
And will that be for a specific time period?
It can be time limited, but not necessarily. The council hasn't necessarily limited the time period for independent appointments to other committees.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
Maybe just a comment really. I do speak in support of the officer recommendation. I'd just like to make a comment on those that pay the targeted tourism rate outside of Hamlet Springs. And I used to be one of them. And I just want it to be said that those people really want to feel part of Haringey Tourism well, and it's not all about Hamlet. Sorry, Tom, but there's a bigger world out there that they want to be feel part of that destination management plan as well. So that's just a comment.
Thank you. I'll go with Fiona and then Robbie.
I was just checking, it's been moved and seconded or just moved at this stage?
No, I haven't gone waiting. I've got that in the wings, but I haven't actually received and moved.
I thought you moved it.
Yeah, I think Karen's really willing to do it, but I just haven't received that yet. I've got some questions to explore, I guess, before I'll come back to Karen. So have you okay? Robbie, I'll come to you then Pauline.
Yeah, I was just going to go and endorse what Karen said there, and that we have had quite a period, and we've come into with the tourism board a real period of alignment, I think. And funny enough, as you make your comment, Ross, that's been very much a part of that too. And I think at the moment it's in a pretty good place, and I thoroughly agree with where it's got to. And yeah, I don't know, move or second, but I was going to say I'd second if you move, but I'm happy to go third.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure that there's no further questions to clarify, and then I'm going to come back to Karen. Pauline, you got
a comment really rather than a question, and I guess it's in relation to what Councillor Barnes had said, because it's something that's been top of mind for me. It's about tourism in the district. And my thought, and thank you very much for taking us through the process, Karen, but my thought when I looked at this was actually, you know, to allow 3 independent members, that actually could encompass a whole lot further reach across the district. Because I looked at the membership and thought, well, you know, there's no one there from kind of the northeast, if you like, and so yeah, I'm in support of what's here. Yeah, happy to let others move in second though.
Yeah, I'm just question.
Yeah, Karen, you mentioned that there were other models of running, such as trust or CCCO. Have we explored either of those or given any consideration to either of those and made a decision one way or the other?
Through you, Madam Chair, the board did consider those other models and we talked through those models. Karen, you probably correct me if I'm wrong on this, but one of the big drawbacks of the other models is the actual cost of running those models for a relatively modest budget.
Yeah, that's attention point. Karen, do you want to add anything to that? Just
Yes, I think further to that, the board did talk about, I mean, I guess the current funding model is the TTR, as we know, and while Hammer Springs Thermal Pools and Spa puts in some money as well, there are a few other funding sources that we can tap into at this time, apart from considering something like a general rate, which quite a lot of the other RTOs have, you know, coming in. And there wasn't, I guess, appetite around the board table at this time to consider a general rate. But I think the board felt that this was one way where we could take some steps toward having a broader focus across the district, but still stay within our limited budget. And you know, I think it is a real challenge because we also, and I've made this point in the board meetings as well, you know, we need to be honest and acknowledge that the destination management plan is requiring us to take a broader focus than marketing itself, but really we're collecting a targeted tourism rate that is by its very nature saying marketing is a key thing that we're going to do for our district. And so it's actually it feels like a slight ethical dilemma for me that we use a little bit of the tourism, targeted tourism, or the funding from the board to achieve some of the other things that we have to, but our primary focus still has to be very much on district-wide promotion. And I think, you know, as Vanessa mentioned earlier, to see that as a subset of our whole economic development is something, you know, I'd love to see us have an economic development strategy in time too, but once again, we need to sort of line up a number of things to get that moving. So this is sort of, it feels like an important step as part of a journey. Yeah.
It has a huge amount of history. It's not that many years ago that we actually didn't have a place around the board tourism board table for Amberley NZ. You know, we're talking a window of 6 years probably. So, you know, there has been significant change, and it's up to all of us to say actually it's not fundamentally broken, but actually it needs some, you know, strategic improvement or strategic change to manage the change that's been put in front of us, and that's the discussion that's been had. But you know, it's actually not that long ago where Amberley NZ were not present around the table. So you know, things alter and change as we go, and that's the nature of the beast.
Just following on from that comment, Madam Mayor, I remember probably in my first term on council, we decided to go out and get an independent member on the tourism committee, and it was a similar situation where people felt that there was a massive focus on Hanmer, and we made a variety of moves, and I think in that we came in with the Waipara Valley wine about that time too, to be a second leg. It was somewhere around there and really started that. So it's had a growth, but I think all the way through, the biggest challenge has always been funding. And it's been discussed before about having a general rate across the district, and it runs into issues there with what if we're going to do that, what we would do for farmers, and a whole host of other things. So I understand the difficulties, but I support where you've come to.
So I guess the paper that is in front of us is providing or endorsing that recommendation. So Karen, can I ask you, are you willing to move that as written?
I'd be delighted to move as written.
So thank you. Do I have a seconder? Okay. Too many hands. Fiona, thank you. If there's no further questions to that or an agreement to that recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That motion is carried. And just by way of process, this action now will just further endorse. A paper will come to this council before the election with a proposal of what the committees will look like. Can you just remind me, when does that happen then?
So this council has the option of making recommendations.
Yeah.
About the structure of committees going forward.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to, I mean, you've made a recommendation about this committee.
Yeah.
You might be happy to be silent about the rest of them or
Yeah, okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's up to the new council when sworn in to decide what
Yes.
what governance structure it wants to put in place, what membership it wants on
Yeah.
committees, if it wants
Yeah.
committees, how they're going to work. So
That's
it's
right.
entirely up to them.
Yeah, okay, but I think in the past we've had like a recommendation ahead of.
We have-
Anyway,
we
I'm
have
happy to
sometimes-
leave that
we
there,
have-
yeah,
we have
yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
I also note that because this was a resolution of the tourism board, I would have been taking it to the new council anyway.
Yeah.
So saying there was a resolution from the community,
Correct. Yeah.
tourism board.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I guess it's just important in the process that we now know that this was, this will continue and as a recommendation.
Yep.
Because of the weight that's been given on this decision today. Yeah. Thank you. Councillors, I'm just conscious that we've got our next item is the CWMS action plan budget. But we're scheduled to receive or have in attendance with us the ECAN officers at 10:45, which we have probably still got about 10 minutes before we could break for morning tea. So I'm just wondering, Hamish, would you be happy to do the discussion item on the greenhouse emissions?
Sure.
Thank you. And that we'll see how that leads us, and if it gets us through about 10:30, I think that would be quite helpful. Thank you. So we're looking at page 58 in your agenda.
For a number of years now, we've been running an internal greenhouse gas emissions report. So many organisations look at their carbon footprint, and generally they get consultants to produce reports looking at carbon. What we've done is we have utilised the New Zealand Ministry for the Environment modelling for how to calculate your carbon footprint, and we've done it ourselves. What we're really looking to see is our carbon footprint increasing or decreasing. And in using that modelling, we don't go down to every last bit of paper. We look at our main of our carbon footprint. For us, that's electricity, diesel, flights, etc. And with electricity being the overwhelming part of our carbon. So this is Helga's been doing this work for a number of years now, working through these. So this, I think, is our 5th year of looking at our emissions. So as I said, we look at the scope 1 emissions. So emissions from sources that are owned and controlled by the organisation. And then scope 2, or other sources stream the organisation. And we pay much less attention to the scope 3, so distribution losses, etc., etc. We do pick up some of those if we think they're significant. In general terms, we have seen a decrease in our greenhouse gas emissions for this year, but it's not driven by a decrease in consumption. It's actually driven by a decrease in the amount of coal that's been burned to produce the electricity over the period 23. So although our carbon footprint is lower, it's not because we've managed to lower our consumption of electricity, which is our main contributor, or our diesel usage. Those things continue to increase. So electricity there's an amount put on by the Crown each year saying this is the amount of greenhouse gas per kilowatt hour. And because we had relatively good lake storage, good hydro production, we burn less coal as a country, and so our greenhouse gas emissions on electricity usage are lower.
Just a question on that.
Yep.
Hamish, what does the Haranui District Council got to do with burning coal in Huntly? Really, when you think of the practical side of it, carbon, because we're using all renewable energy in the South Island, right?
Yeah, but this is the national scale.
Was sending it back south then.
This is a national scale. It's a rule of thumb, if you like, and so we use the national figures to calculate ours. That's why I've highlighted the fact that it's not for a reduction in the use of electricity. It's through a reduction nationally of the amount of coal used.
Happy with that answer? Yeah. Anything else there?
No, I mean, the report's there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to take any questions about the report.
Got Vanessa and then Ross. Thanks, Vanessa.
Through the Chair, Hamish, we have a legal obligation under the RMA to prepare this inventory report, is that right?
No.
So what obligation do we actually have to be doing this? No, so
It's a voluntary thing, but we have an obligation to provide leadership in our communities. We're looking at our carbon footprint. We did this because generally when people start looking at the carbon footprints, they end up with consultants and it costs a lot of money. We believe that you can do it yourself relatively cheaply. You're not going to be exact calculations, but you're going to figure out what your main greenhouse gas emissions areas are, and then you can figure out what you can do about it. Electricity is one of our main areas, and the bulk of our electricity is used for pumping water to our customers and running our wastewater. That's where the bulk of our electricity is used. So we consider when we're working on these things about what we can do to make these things more energy efficient, and greater energy efficiency should be cheaper for our consumers.
subsequent to that, through the Chair, if our stance, our as in the country's stance on the Paris Agreement changes, would that influence how we approach this?
No, I don't think so. I think that, I think it makes good business sense to look at greenhouse gas emissions and say, what can we do to reduce them? Because generally you're reducing them by either changing electricity generation or electricity consumption, or energy generation or energy consumption. So, if you use less energy, then it's lower cost.
It adds to the factors of change across Canterbury with the climate change action plan. I mean, this is one of the determinants that might be considered as part of that change action that might come over time. I've got Ross and then Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'd just like to make a comment. And look, Helga's done a great bit of work here. I don't agree with you totally, Hamish, on our need to do this, and I'd like to just make a statement that I've listened, as you all will have, to as our role as councillors, to listen to the bigger picture, to other people who are have a lot to say about climate change, and I've listened to a interview with Barry Brill, and he's the New Zealand Climate Science Coalition chairman, so he's not a nobody. There's a bit of weight, and I'm hoping others have listened to his interview as well. And New Zealand is a carbon sink.
research in 2017 shows that more CO2 in the air approaches New Zealand than leaves. This is a fact. Humans in New Zealand create some CO2, but 6 times more is absorbed by our vegetation. In New Zealand, only plantation forest is counted. Okay, this is very important. Every other country in the world counts all vegetation. It's only Japan and New Zealand count plantation. That's a really interesting fact. So in reality, we are millions of tons of carbon in credit. That's the reality. So to finish with, I'm disappointed that we've had to spend officers' time to prepare this, when that time could have been spent on doing something far more important.
I've got a few more. Karen, you?
Yeah, always happy.
Yeah, and then I'll come to you guys.
Wasn't related to what Ross was saying, I just wondered if, I understand that there's been an increase in the usage of electricity, partly related to a lot of the infrastructure upgrades and so on, and I'm just wondering, I think I've seen little solar panels here and there, are we using solar as much as we can to help offset electricity in some of these remote areas?
Through Madam Mayor, we do look at solar and for things like comms network and that sort of thing. We utilise some solar. We utilise solar in this building to generate about 25% of our electricity in this building. But we would require large scale solar to give a meaningful offset to our electricity used in our water pumping and
So just a supplementary question then, if you like, the roof spaces of the pumping stations and stuff, not really the investment?
It would not make a significant dent in our electricity usage.
Thanks, Karen.
When do we see the Hammer Springs Spa and emissions? I see there's a report done separately.
Yep. That goes to the rules board. We can consider them here.
Because it's going to be interesting with our new structure that goes through on the water. We'll take away all that electricity, most of it, won't it?
Yep.
But really, it's just all paper, isn't it? You know, because it's still all happening.
Yeah, so we've just made that. Thanks,
Smoke
Ross.
and mirrors.
Yeah, Tom?
Thank you. And Ross, I would like to agree to disagree with you on this. So I think that it is worthy of taking a check on where we are with regard to our emissions. And I look particularly at page 69. When I look at the amount of electricity that we use, and I see there that by far the biggest consumer of electricity is our water supply, with over 6 million kilowatts purchased. And I wondered, are we taking any steps to reduce that consumption, to reduce obviously consumption costs and emissions all at the same time?
We do look when we're looking at our schemes to see whether there are ways. Obviously the greatest electricity cost is not in the treatment plants, but it's actually pumping water around to get it to where you really want it. And we live in a relatively hilly district. We've got some water schemes that aren't optimally designed and that are taking water from down low and pumping it up high. Without a rework of some of those schemes, it's difficult to come up with a design. Well, it's basically all required. So we do look at those things.
Thank you for that, Tom. Dave, I see your hand up, so you got a question that you're.
I'm not sure how to put that hand up on Zoom, finding Zoom quite hard. Just to Tom and Karen, pumps don't run on solar. I can't make it really pay putting solar panels on my cow shed to run hot water cylinders. It's just not enough energy. And Tom, to lack of water, using less water, remember what is it, 80-90% of the water goes to stock, not to people. And as I've always said, you're probably your water schemes aren't fit for purpose as they are for demand, because they were designed in the 80s. And I just point out the greenhouse gases on the farms. The dairy industry is doing a huge amount of work at trying to get efficiencies, doing more production per cow, and every lifestyle block and every trees that take farming away is by default improving it throughout the country. So yeah, so you don't want wind farms are probably the least expensive way of symbolism.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Dave, for your comment. It's been well received around the table. Thank you. Look, I think we've had, challenged the assumptions of what's in the report, what's the purpose, why, but, we also understand that sometimes having data actually helps us to manage change when advancement of technologies come in place for us as well. So, having some data analysis in front of us, and take your point, Ross, about the why, but, it does provide us with a measurable opportunity to make changes as we advance in these new technologies. So, look, if there's no further questions to receiving this report, it was a discussion item, and I think that we've had a very fruitful discussion in that regard. If you've got nothing else to add, Hamish, I'm looking at the recommendation on page 58, if councillors are on mind. So
Happy to move the information we received.
thank you, Fiona. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Tom. If there's no further comments to be made, I will put that motion. All in agreement that we receive the information, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you for that discussion. It does take us nicely to our morning tea break. And I do ask that you are back around the table at 10:45 when we have a presentation from ECAN officers Andrew Turnbull and James. Thank you. And so if we're back around the table at 10:45, Dave, we'll see you back then. Thank you. We're meeting as adjourned. continue with their agenda item in front of us on page 53. Putting an expectation there was going to be a presentation from our friends from ECAN, so that you're just here to, in support of the report that's been written by Judith, and to answer any questions around the report. So that's great. I'm pleased to receive this report. It was a discussion I had actually with Stephanie and Craig at last Mural Forum, but to just keep a line of sight on the funding allocation. So I'm pleased that it's come to us for discussion. And so Judith, your name's here as the author. Perhaps if you would just like to give us a bit of an overview, and then we can perhaps just have some questions to clarify or questions out of inquiry, and see where this gets us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia, and thanks to Murray Griffin, who actually wrote the report in the ECAN format, and I've just rewritten that to fit it in with our template. So the information that's in the report has come from ECAN, from Murray. So this funding was previously referred to as the immediate steps funding. It was $50,000 a year, and is budgeted in Environment Canterbury's long-term plan. Environment Canterbury continue to allocate it to the Hurunui Waiuwha zone in the absence of the zone committee. So at point 2 in the summary, there is the explanation that they promoted this funding, and 8 applications were received. Environment Canterbury and Hurunui council staff actually were involved in the assessment of the applications. So I know that Andrew was part of that. Not sure whether Randall was in that meeting or not, but we did have input into that.
Andrew Mac here.
So and at 2, it sets out how it's the recommendation in terms of the $50,000 allocation. And then if you carry on down to background 5, then each of the projects are set out, and the first one is $9,000, and then the recommendation is 9, but the next one was 50,000 and the recommendation is 9,605. So that's how the figure has, the allocation has been determined, is actually that next figure, which is the support, just to explain. So there was more requested than the 50,000. So we've got James and Andrew here from Environment Canterbury to answer any technical questions around either the project, which is in the projects are in the attachment, or the rationale for how much has been allocated.
Thank you, Judith, for that high-level summary of the report. I felt quite excited when I read the report to see that our community, and a lot of those are individual landowners, but actually the group context of real grassroots regeneration of activity in the space. So it's good to see this. But first and foremost, welcome James and Andrew to our table, and I'm not sure, do you want to say anything, or would I just do a quick introduction of councillors to see where they come from, or anything you'd like to preface my questioning on? Are you happy with
just a wee introduction on what we do?
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
I'm a biodiversity advisor, and so Northern Zone, so Waimaka, Hurunui, and up recently Kakora. So I advise landowners on biodiversity on their land, and I work with other agencies, other projects.
Thank you, James. Andrew.
Andrew Turnbull. I'm a land management and biodiversity advisor, heavily involved in the soil con program in Hurunui, referred to as SCAR. So through that engagement, we need a lot of other opportunities and look forward funding opportunities for the community to apply for, and that's how we needed quite a few of these that have been approved.
That's great, thank you for that. Maybe a quick look around the table from a councillor perspective, just so that James and Andrew know where we all sit or reside within our community of Hiranui, because I think there's a good spread of projects that are in that allocation as well. So can I start with you, Karen?
Sure, I'm Karen Armstrong and I'm a West Ward councillor. I reside in Waikato.
Thank you.
Ross Barnes, West Ward councillor, live up at Mount Lyford, and I've got a few questions regarding the Conway River one. Out of interest.
Morning. Okay, sorry, I'm Vanessa McPherson. I'm South Ward councillor.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Good morning, Tom Davies, West Ward, Hammond Springs.
Hi, Vince Daly, Deputy Mayor up in the east of Cheviot. Been on the zoning committee for quite a while since when it was going. I'll have a couple of questions about sustainability of these projects, because it seems to be just a do we ever go back and carry on like we've done other work, and be just interested to know how we're funding that to carry it on.
Just hold on to those questions and we'll do that in a minute. Yep, Fiona.
Fiona Harris, I do the south end of the East Ward. We've got land in Waipara, but we live in Melcairn at the moment.
That's Wayne White from the South Ward, I'm in Brookfield.
Robbie Ruitt, South Ward councillor, based here in Amberley.
That's great. So we've got the paper. Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, Dave. My apologies. Thank you, Fiona, for reminding me. We've got Dave Hislop coming in by Teams today, but quick introduction, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, Dave Hislop, West Ward councillor, Balance Dairy Farmer of the Year, Canterbury Balance Supreme winner of Dairy Farmer of the Year 2018. So not just a dairy farmer and an eco warrior.
Knew I left you to last for a reason, Dave, so thank you for that.
You were trying to forget about that I was a dairy farmer.
See, I knew you'd never let me away with that. Rightio, let's bring this back to the paper that we do have in front of us today. Well formatted, we understand, and the background information that we've received is I felt really helpful as well. But we've obviously got a couple of questions that perhaps Andrew or James and Judith maybe can help us with to fulfil the inquiry from councillors as well. So I'm going to start with you, Ross. Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, can I suggest we work through them project by project? So we start, which is the Conway River one.
Yeah, okay.
So that we don't end up jumping from project to project with questions, that we just work through them.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Thank you for that suggestion. Thank you, Ross. You're first up, number one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, it's just a question regarding where has the invasion come from? Have we tracked down, is it from, do I say, council retaining groves up further upstream, or where has that seed source come from?
So we've taken samples and sent it off to Landcare to be identified, so that's how we know it's purple. We're going to go back in the spring to try and work out whether it's seeding, because the scientists can't give us a definite whether it's seeding, but my prediction is that the purple strain of willow has been present in the Conway catchment for a long time. We see quite old vegetation there. New varieties potentially have been brought in that are now cross-pollinating, and that's why we've seen such a.
Okay, so I'm assuming it's palatable to stock.
It's a bit
Although you always used to be, but
it's a bitter type bullet.
Oh, okay.
So it's
stock.
stock don't eat it. Cows definitely don't eat it. So you see it in the Leader River now taking off.
Yeah. Look, to me, this is horrendous. It's a horrendous problem, and so can it be eliminated? So that should be a goal, to get rid of it, and then you don't have to worry about it again. But
doubtful. Maybe Andrew, maybe give a bit of history of the control that we've done in the last few years.
So this will be a third year of controlling it in Conway.
Okay.
Top-down type control is, we originally spent 80,000 on aerial control, with HTCs contributing as well around infrastructure and NZTA and KiwiRail. Then followed that up with the ground control of around 30K. And then this will be another ground control operation, top down again.
So this is down near the bottom.
No, this is it.
What is it stuff?
It's right at the top. Conway
Inland Road.
Inland Road Bridge.
Oh, really?
And it's scattered throughout and then you get down lower. But it is present in the Bondall Mason lottery and obviously Mason coming out. And you'll see it in the wire. You see it now because it holds its leaf a lot later.
Yeah.
Than the other. Will crack below.
So the horse is bolted, really.
And for a week like this, is it suiting our conditions? Is it evident in much wider spread across other parts of New Zealand, or, you know, I mean, probably following on from Ross's questions, you know, how does this?
In Canterbury,
Yeah.
North Canterbury is the hotspot for it.
Right.
Heavily used by the railways in the past to stabilise. And still being used by HTC as of last year in the road in the north. But RENA to identify what it was that purchasing from the north. That's been circulated around. It's not a species to be but it's in the rivers now. So and the way it grows, it's a really a bitter willow, so soft don't graze it. And it's a basket willow, so it's very flexible. So in a flood, it'll just bend over and then pop back up again, it won't break off. And it, we're finding it just filling old braids more than each rivers. So once it fills that old braid, it's quite a big through to a braid.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you, Ross.
Is there any allowance, like it's just saying we're going for follow-up control again? Because I look at when we've done those islands for birds nesting, and we seem to not have any more funding, so poor old birds have been left to it again, really. You know, it's good. I'm not knocking these projects, but I'm just saying that we need to have built into some of those ones that there's continuous work, or otherwise we're wasting.
Oh, I just thought the bird on. So we had funding this financial year for that. Unfortunately, at the time we planted the enhancement and we had consent on it in a certain period. The river was too high, so we haven't spent that money. So that money is there with the Department of Conservation to spend next financial year. I think, and we're seeking more funding for that. The Waiwa River is a priority site for us.
So the project that Vince is identifying is not lost.
Yep.
It just wasn't used this year because of the seasonal impact of wet river flows and whatever. Okay, so the funding also probably answers some of your question, Vince. You know,
Well, I'm just
about
wondering, like the other project, like the bird nesting one, is there any ongoing funding?
So there's
Yeah.
currently funding with the Department of Conservation to spend next financial year, and we'll be seeking more funding.
Because really, even the weed spraying, it's not eradicating, it's only controlling, isn't it? So they'll be back there again. You know, it's just having a program, and it's the funding side. You guys are just the Indians delivering, but you know, it needs policy there that has, we do projects like this and like a riverbeds and that, because it's sort of just common land, you could say, where the landowners not really. And just to keep the projects going, really.
Yeah, I guess like all these projects, it's great intent, and it is about continuing if there is availability of funding to, you know, keep oversight, to manage or control as best we can. If we do nothing, we're exposing the problem more, and
difficult to curb and control again, so, you know, some ongoing, as manages that sustainability factor that you talked about earlier, Vince, I guess. Yeah, is that how you guys would see it? Yeah, cool. So we've got the 6 projects. The question that I have, and I'd quite like to understand more, that ECAN staff are looking to support the other projects that are on page 54 of our agenda, the Mullion Swamp Restoration and the Spy Stream. So can you just tell me a little bit more of how that, what's that support likely to look like in those projects, because they weren't successful in the first 6 allocated?
The main reason they weren't successful is that we could see that they fitted better in another. So we could say we're pretty confident these will be funded through another funding stream.
Right. Yeah, okay. Oh, well, that's pleasing to know, isn't it, that you purposeful projects, but they're not being lost in the application round of this sort of 12-month period, I guess, until the funding comes back. That's cool. Thank you, Vince. Another question?
Just on, you know, looking at a lot of the projects, even the Mount Palm project, which is really good. It's a big project, and there'll be a lot of maintenance, won't there, when you're planting like that? Is there allowance? Have we got a plan for the next 10 years?
It's built into the landowner's in-kind contribution, is that long-going maintenance. Yeah, like it's been assessed. There's very little weed burden in the sites. It's just green pasture. So shouldn't be a lot of maintenance.
And then they'll have an agreement to sign.
They have got an agreement to sign.
I'm not sure what other councillors felt, but I felt that the projects that have been received this allocation actually were well spread across the district, but actually there was real benefit for not just that from an individual landowner, but actually there was a much broader base of focus. So I felt that it actually was, I was quite, as I said earlier, I was quite excited to see the suite of projects that actually made this year's allocation. So I know it's difficult when you get a contestable fund, how to factor the funding, but it looks to me, and it's pleasing to hear about those other 2 projects that will be picked up by another income stream, and we'll leave that with ECAN staff to ensure that happens. Yes, so yeah. Is there any other questions in regard to the report? Good to have it in front of us. Good to have you guys here to support the knowledge, the inquiry. But if there's no more questions in regard to that, we do have a recommendation on page 54 in our agenda. If there's nothing else, or if someone is on the line to move that recommendation, I'm in your hands, councillors. Thank you.
Just before that happens, Madam Mayor, I didn't declare a conflict of interest, but just for transparency, I'm a member of the Northern Pegasus Bay Coast Care Group. However, I'm inactive in that membership and haven't had any part in funding applications. So I just want to be transparent rather than conflict of interest. So I don't feel that is a conflict.
We'll record that.
Thank you. Yeah, just for transparency.
So are you happy to move, Councillor?
I am.
Yep. So Fiona's happy to move that the council endorses the 6 projects proposed for support from the CWS and MS Action Plan budget for the Piranui Waio Upa Water Zone in the 24-25 financial year. Do I have a seconder? Oh, but I'm going to go with Ross this time round. So I'm expecting there's no further questions to that. I'm going to put that motion. All in agreement, that please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That motion is carried. Just as a secondary, how will we find out, or will you inform us, or on those 2 projects that are going to be picked up through other funding streams? Will we understand that has happened, that it has become an action? Now, like, what is the, this isn't the end point, it's, how do we understand what's going to happen next as far as that goes?
Yeah, we're talking to the landowner there, he's working on PB2 that month, we've got funding, but council safety available. So we can report to you next successful. And following we will be working on that next financial year. So we can report back to you.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. I think councillors would find that really interesting to understand how that, you know, we get that potential investment, I guess, in the development of those projects. So yeah, I mean, if that fits for your work plan, I think it would be well received by this council. So thanks very much for your time and working through this project. I know probably on behalf of Murray maybe, but it's good to have you here, and thank you for the opportunity to question and understand better. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Can I jump around and do the monthly performance report? Is that okay, until we get Alan in the room? Thanks.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So councillors, if we just go to 129, thank you. So we'll just receive this information until we get Alan in the room. Thank you. Thank you, Hamish.
So, Madam Mayor, if we look at the month of April, we have a red box in our recycling ratio, 27% against that. Of 31, so we're down again for the month. Really helps for the month to meet the target. If year to dates that are over.
Right, yeah, that's you. Thank you. Councillors, have you got any questions in regard to that monthly performance report? It's our standard report. All questions, is there anybody of a mind to move it? Thank you, Karen. Happy to second that, Pauline. All those in agreement with that, please say aye. Are you good to go? Like, okay, so we're going a bit of a hickledy-pickledy order, I'm sorry, councillors, but we're going to go back and one more page to 127. Can you see where we're at? We're on page 127 in the agenda. The Lagoima request, Graham, this is your report, so can you just take us through that one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the table of requests here on page 128. Those in progress ones have been completed yet. That are all still in progress, yes, but I'm happy to take any questions about any particular questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from councillors? Oh, okay, I'll go to you, Tom.
And yeah, just wanted the information about accessible parking, and we provided some information, but we didn't provide it all. Obviously, it was an extensive request.
Yes, Madam Mayor. It was for accessible parking throughout the district. So for us to have found that information would take a lot of work. So we could provide it for council properties, buildings, and the building team provided, the property team provided kind of the information, but the full extent would have been a big job. So we did offer to do it, but it would have been a charge. It's a charitable organisation, so they didn't pay.
And just in regard to item number 6, the Taxpayers Union committee memberships, is that where they get information about council attendance at committees, or what's that in regard?
Madam Mayor, this one is more about the structure of the council committees, but there was also quite a few questions around independent members of committees, including their CVs and payments and all that sort of thing. So we're still working through that, but I suspect we will withhold some of that for privacy reasons, particularly around the CVs of the independent members. That was the main structure, it wasn't actually about attendance.
Attendance at meetings, because often they do those sort of meetings, don't they?
Yes, yeah, they generally do one of those, yeah.
Yeah, okay, interesting, thank you. Robbie?
Oh, I just wondered if there was any, on the nature or purpose of number 8.
There was a very simple question about who's supplied the topsoil. The chief operating officer just provided that as to where it came from. It came from the in retirement village. It was excavated from that site.
Pretty close to heart, that sounds good. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you, councillors. We've received that information around the Lodoima requests. Someone happy to move that we receive that information? Robbie? Thank you, Tom. All in agreement with that, please say aye. Aye. Very, thank you. Adios. Now we will hop back. Welcome, Alan. Good to see you here, and it's always good to hear your report around the civil defence and emergency management update. So, councillors, we're on page 73 in your report, and yeah, I hand over to you, Alan. You can take us through it, and we'll no doubt get some questions, and then we'll go from there. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you all for having me here today. Hopefully, we'll take the report as being read. I would like to highlight a couple of key points throughout the actual report itself. First of all, you hopefully will have picked up that it's been an incredibly busy start to the year. We had the opportunity to do a number of different community engagements. Some of them required a lot of resources in terms of staff time and so forth. So you will have noticed some things have actually fallen away while other things were added. I'll take the first part as being read in terms of just the general outline of how civil defence emergency management works. You'll have noticed that we've been highly busy working with the Canterbury Team program as well as the Emergency Management Assistance Team program. Both of these are where we meet our global responsibilities in terms of being one with the emergency management community across Canterbury and both New Zealand. So I'm heavily involved with both of those programs in terms of contributing towards those. The other big thing that we've done this year was the Hammer Springs evacuation exercise. This involved over 100 volunteers on the day, over 20 agencies and community groups involved. Huge buy-in from the community. Well over 100 spot prizes were donated by the Hammer community, and in fact right through the 2 hours of the actual physical evacuation element of the exercise, spot prizes were being given away every few minutes, which actually led to huge community perspective to the whole exercise. We learned a huge amount of that, both at our own level here at the council, as well as the community groups themselves, of what works, what doesn't at the community level. And the community even now is still heavily motivated from that exercise, the experience of that. Only last night, the Hammer Civil Defence team met again, and we're running through yet another exercise out in the field, making sure that they know exactly how they can respond to their team. So huge benefits have come through from this exercise. Do have to admit, a huge amount of time and resources went into the delivery of that particular exercise, but it's been a success all around. Happy to take any questions on that exercise if anybody has any direct questions concerning the exercise itself and Hammer Springs.
Can I just make a comment? I mean, I was fortunate to be part of that, but actually more from a bird's eye view. And after the declaration was made, and when I first entered the command centre, I guess, the logistics and the comms team and the planning team were sitting around the room, and there was just a scramble of voices and a scramble of information going in and out and across, different. And I was had the privilege to just actually watch it happen. And I thought,
how are they ever going to get a pathway out of this spaghetti junction? Because that's what it looked like in that small room. There was just voices talking over inside, outside each other. But as time evolved and the planning was put in place and the logistics of they need to go there and, you know, actually all of a sudden there was a pathway that evolved. It was a fascinating watch. And for myself, who hadn't had to experience that, thankfully, to actually see the mechanics of it working was really quite intriguing, to be fair. So I know you put a huge amount of work into that, Alan, and but I know it's something that the community had been requesting for such a long time. But what you've talked about, the buy-in from the community, the chat when we went down to the
Evacuation centre.
Evacuation centre, thank you, the paddock. But you know, the confidence that the community was starting to feel that the planning and the due diligence of how it would happen for them if they were in that wildfire situation, and the more conscious decision making about individual home scale planning. What do they need in their pack to actually evacuate really, really quickly, you know? And I think that was the intelligence of the discussion. Robbie was there as well. And I just thought that the planning that you put into that, Alan, needs to be commended, because the community benefit was probably, you know, reached much further than that exercise on that whole day. So, you know, thank you for making that happen, because it's sometimes easier not to let it happen. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that, and it was amazing to watch that process work out when you know it incredibly well, detail, but for the rest of us, we just sort of trust that everybody knows these roles and knows how it's going to work out. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I must confess, there have been multiple benefits coming from this exercise. I train all of the Silver Kings teams around the district, and it's one thing to stand up in front of them, show them some presentations, tell them about how things work. It's another for them to actually try and do it for real. And that's where these exercises are just so valuable, because it's not Alan telling them how to do stuff anymore. It's real problems out in the field. They are telling people, different agencies, different groups, different time frames, how things go, where do they work. They probably got, I estimate, an easy 1 year's normal training value just out of that 1 day exercise. So huge benefits. And you will have noticed further on in the report, I talk about the Emergency Operations Centre training here at the council. We use that same exercise, the real data that came from that exercise to inform 2 Emergency Operations Centre exercises here at the council only a few weeks ago. So yeah, huge cost of this exercise, but the benefits, we are still reaping those benefits from that particular exercise. Yep. Large number of training has been happening with each of the community emergency response teams around the district. Some have been busier than others, and I've got a wee summary sheet we can talk about shortly about that. And also the Youth Emergency Services Program. Some of you may be aware of that particular program. That also happened in Hammer Springs, I think. I'm losing track, either a couple of weeks before or just after the actual evacuation exercise itself. So that was a week-long program.
Yeah.
As well, and normally I'd help run that, but due to competing priorities, I took a step back this year and just helped mentor and support the youth development officer and young William, one of the protages, one of the developing youth in our district, to run that particular exercise. They did a fantastic job of doing that, and just to see once again an exercise, 25 odd casualties with blood all over them, simulating a building collapse. And to see these youth just have that situation thrown at them and then systematically identify where these casualties were, what was wrong with them, stabilise them, get them ready to move them, get them to a casualty collection point and look after them. You know, they did that just on an hour with just less than a week's training. So absolutely amazing what our youth are capable of. And I must admit, one young lady in particular this time round, probably demonstrated to me the most amount of raw leadership potential I've ever seen in one person ever. I'm absolutely blown away at how this young lady took charge of 19 people plus the mentors and just got them all working as a machine. She was brand new to all of this. So it really, really gives me heart for the future and the potential that's in some of our young people. I really just want to acknowledge that as well. So yeah, highly successful youth and emergency services program. And
Can I just interrupt you for a moment, because Pauline and Karen and I
Marie here.
and Marie here, yes, exactly, we had to arrive early on the scene to get you know, blood makeup all over our faces and hands and goodness knows what as we prepared for that exercise. And you know, the young people just were unbelievable. They were just amazing. So yeah, it's a really influential course for those young people to be involved in that, immersed that whole week, and not just learning about themselves and their level of pressure they can put themselves under, but actually that working together is really powerful. Seeing them from opening day on the Monday, I think it was, through to graduation on the Friday, you know, their growth is they make some amazing mentors in that team. So yeah, really good work. Thank you.
Thank you. And so the program finishes off with them volunteering for a 3-month period with a chosen emergency service, just to give them a chance to engage with volunteers and get to know what it's like being a volunteer. Obviously, the downstream effect is hope that they will continue on to volunteer throughout their lives, but they commit to a 3-month volunteering period. So once again, a very well delivered youth and emergency services program. Couple of things you do need to be aware of. This council last year approved the purchase of Starlink units for each of our civil defence teams around the district. We have not yet been able to get most of those purchased due to the National Purchasing Memorandum of Understanding that National Emergency Management Agency has been developing with Starlink. We've been impatiently awaiting that. We only got news yesterday that the Memorandum of Understanding has been signed, and Canterbury is to be the pilot test for this Memorandum of Understanding. So we are hoping that still within this financial year, we'll be able to use the funds allocated by this council and get those units in and then start the rollout and training of the different teams using those units. So we haven't made much progress with that to date, but we're hoping to get moving on that in the next month or so. One of the casualties to the busy program we've had so far this month has been the public alerting siren, the tsunami siren testing down at our beach communities, Amberley Beach and Leithfield Beach. We were not able to do the testing at daylight savings this year, so a decision will have to be made whether we try and do a delayed one or just delay it until daylight savings in several months' time. So I'll let you know how we go with that. There's also been a huge amount of work with the new emergency management bill consultation. We operate under legislation called the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act 2002. That has been under review for the last 5 or 6 years. It's had its second writing already. The latest government that we have now has thrown out the bill as it was written and are rewriting a new one. So over the last month, we've had a huge amount of consultation coming out of all the new proposals for the new Civil Defence Act. So that has kept me hugely busy in the last month trying to make sure they understand what it's like having our communities and the changes that they're proposing, how they may affect our communities. So that's also been a big piece of work. Other than that, I call your attention to Appendix 1, which is the matrix. I'm not sure what page that is of your agendas. It should be at the end of the report there. Page 79, thank you. I need to start first of all with an apology for a typo, a correction on column Harden Waikauri, which is about the middle. That should be 24, not 25, 28, 11, 24. So my apologies for that typo there. So what this particular sheet does is gives you a bit of an idea of the activity of each of the civil defence teams around the district. Some have been incredibly busy this year. Culverden have had multiple meetings, Waipara, Hammer Springs have been the busiest ones, as has Scargill, Greta Valley, Lucknow. Cheviot have also been very, very busy. The casualties for the first part of this year are Amberley, and Waikari are the two that were very busy last year that have had a very slow start to the year. And my apologies for that. We can only do so much with the limited resources that we have, but there are plans in place to get those up and moving again shortly. Waiau, still no significant actions in terms of bringing a team together there. And Mount Lyford, still in talks with them about having an informal team arrangement where they might do 1 or 2 trainings a year. So happy to take any questions or hear any concerns you might have about those teams.
It's just interesting, Alan, that the 2 areas in the earthquake, which was sort of the centre of it, sort of have died away and gone quiet. Is it because the response last time or what? I'm just trying to look for the causes, because I thought that'd be the communities which would know actually how it all works and everything, and I'm just trying to get my head around it.
Absolutely, through the chair. It's a really legitimate question to ask, and it's something we've had a look at. But I can think of other areas that were also affected by that Hiranui Kaikoura quake, where things didn't go as well as they could have, and they had rallied together as communities, built teams, and started doing training. I hope I'll join area up as one of those. Councillor Daly, in terms of the success they're running at the moment. I generally find that the way teams progress, come together, comes down to the local leadership and the people and personalities of those communities, the local politics that are in play, and just a general feel of those communities. So some communities are very close-knit, some can be politically divided at a local level, others are the sorts of communities that people just want to go there and do their own thing. And so the activity of most of these teams greatly reflects the general feel of those communities and the leadership that's available for those teams. We only have to look at what happened with Hammer Springs last year when the local leader, Grubb, was away on his big overseas tour, and with that change of leadership, things changed drastically. The activity of that team dropped away, and then when Grubb came back, it immediately picked up again. So I can support these teams, but I can't provide the actual energy from within those teams themselves.
It's such a saying in civil defence and emergency management, you know, don't wait for the cavalry, we are the cavalry, you know, so it's actually beholden on our communities to build that cavalry capacity in many ways.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, absolutely. And I don't have the capacity to drive all of these different communities equally all at the same time. So I very much rely on the energy of those local leaders to do the driving and then support them to make things happen at that local level. So some of these more active ones will get less support from me over the coming months, while I put the energy into some of the ones that have been a bit quieter. So it's a constant balancing act to keep that going. But all of the teams are cyclical. They all go up and down in their activity, their actions over time. And that's something that's just become a real pattern over the last decade.
Question from
Sorry.
Vanessa.
Chair, Alan, the public alerting siren testing, does that involve evacuation, or is it just a press of the button and make sure it works?
No, it's a press of a button. The challenges and all of the public alerting, we need to do public information to those communities in the weeks leading up to a test to make sure that we don't create panic. So the systems themselves are interrogated with a brief sound that doesn't alert the community, so we know the system itself works. So the actual testing we're doing is just the loud testing of the actual horns themselves to make sure that they're functioning
Why
as
does
they
it
should.
need to be done at daylight saving?
Doesn't necessarily have to be done, but across the country, we all try to do it at that same time if we possibly can. So it's just become a bit like changing your smoke alarms or testing your smoke alarms at daylight savings. We do the siren testing at the same time. So it's really just finding the time to get the public information out there to do the test.
Thanks, Vanessa. Good question from Karen.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just looking at the real-time evacuation tracking tool successfully tried. I hadn't heard of that before. Is it actively available for use, or is it still in the trial? And how did it work?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. This was an exciting tool we used where our volunteers have an app on their smartphones. And as they went around doing their door knocking, they typed in the address and whether or not people were evacuating, and that immediately showed up on a dashboard on the TV screen in our coordination centre. So what that gave was real-time information about how many doors have been door knocked on at any given time, how many people were going to evacuate, how many people were refusing to evacuate, how many people were at home, and so forth. So that worked really, really well. It was a tool that was developed coming out of the Lake Oho fire that devastated the Lake Oho community a number of years ago. This was the first time it's been used for real, in either the real event or a real evacuation exercise. It worked very, very well, although we did note some people had some technology challenges using of their phones and their apps. And so we actually had several door knocking teams who stopped using the app and just went back to pen and paper, recording it down. So while we've recorded 322 doors knocked on the dashboard, we'd actually door knocked almost 400 when all of the information came in. But even with that failure for a couple of teams to be able to fully access the technology, was still a much better way of tracking the progress of the exercise and the door knocking teams. So in effect, within 2 hours, we were able to door knock on 400 homes. There are 1,600 properties in Hammer Springs. So this exercise also gave us some really valuable metrics for how long it takes to do the door knocking. So now we know 14 door knocking teams of 2 people per team, 2 hours can door knock 400 homes. So if we want to do that in 2 hours for the whole thing, we need to quadruple the resource going in or allow longer time. So, and when we review the evacuation plan for Hammer Springs, we'll introduce a table and interpolate some information from the metrics coming from the exercise to give us a guide for timeframes and number of resources required to door knock Hammer Springs. And we may even be able to extrapolate some of that information for planning other communities as well. So very, very few people around the country have done full-on evacuation exercises. Perhaps they're not quite foolish. There'll be enough to buy into these sorts of things because they do take a lot, but yeah, highly successful all up. And the evacuation dashboard tool that we use, the tracking tool, is run by Canterbury Civil Defence. They are the ones who developed it upon request from us. It's not, it can be used within a couple of hours of being asked for it to be used.
Let's note in relation to point 31 that subsequent to this report being written, both Jason and I have attended recovery exercise with Canterbury Civil Defence that operation which both Jason and I attended with rural sector. So we haven't ignored recovery exercise completely. We've been doing a bit.
Okay, that pretty much covers the highlights that I wanted to summarise. Wouldn't have to take any questions on anything else.
Thank you, Alan. You've answered some questions as we've gone through the report, which is always really helpful, but Robbie, good to go.
Yeah, a couple of things. Yeah, first of all, the exercise up in Hammer, that's a big well done. You must have learned a lot from that. But I couldn't help but notice, you know, civil defence is often stop the squeaky squeal in general council business, and if there's, it's not sort of front and foremost until there's an event, and then it is. I couldn't help but notice the other day in the operations meeting in the capital expenditure for 24-25, there wasn't too many ticks against the civil defence yet, and I'm really pleased that you've said around Starlink, because by my maths it's nearly half the budget that's available. But I guess with the, I'm saying with the end of the year coming, I think don't be shy with the rest. It's kind of it's kind of like, yeah, if you don't jump up and down and make a noise, I think it's an area of our business which can kind of missing it. And I don't think it should, because if the event does happen, then we'll all wonder what happened.
Thank you.
I guess that's the importance of developing these localised
I
teams
guess I'm
as
saying,
well, yeah.
Use it or lose it.
That's right. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Alan, for what you did in Hammer, and I'm sorry I wasn't there to be part of it because I was away on holiday, but I think that I was part of the planning before the event and talking to people about their plans on the day, I think is really, really important, because I know that I sat there in school and the automatic reaction was, how do we as a staff look after the children that are with us, and how are we going to look after them? But then it's also, hang on a minute, I've got a home, I've got a pet, I've got a wife, I've got a car, I've got other family, and it's not just thinking about your immediate situation in the event of it's thinking of those ripples that go out about how do you support other people that you need to support, as well as the people you might be responsible for when you're working. And that was a really valuable exercise as well, to plan for the event, and you know, that's really important part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. And there were a number of other agencies that also discovered that they either had no plan, or the plans they had in place to deal with the wildfire evacuation were actually nowhere near good enough, including the forestry camp, the medical centre, looking at their plans. So once again, the benefits from this exercise will just continue to multiply.
It's interesting, it's probably from some of those early discussions as well, Tom, but because the exercise was happening on a Sunday, and the Mr. McBride principal and some students volunteered to be in a classroom setting on that day, you know, and it was, but they were going to use that as part of their volunteering and community hours or something. So, you know, there was, yeah, so they had in situ some a classroom activity in place on that day to evacuate. You know, probably some of that early thinking as well. Vanessa.
Through the chair, Ellen, you and I have talked about this before, and we both share this similar vision when it comes to pet rescue. Throughout all of this very fantastic work you're doing, has there been any developments on that, or anyone in the community perhaps that are sort of on par with where we're at in our head?
I wouldn't call them developments. We have had a couple of engagements with MPI, who have sort of the national mandate for animal welfare across the country. They did plan to have somebody at the Hammer Springs exercise to look at the animal welfare question and how we might be able to work that in. Unfortunately, they got physically ill on the day and were unable to come along. We also had a meeting with MPI several months ago. Unfortunately, the overriding message they had was that while they might have the national mandate for oversight of animal welfare, it's up to each district to manage it themselves. I made it very clear to them that I understood that overall sentiment, but if a district is overwhelmed, the expectation in the national mandate says that MPI is responsible to bring in resource from wherever else, either it's themselves or what they organise. So we're having ongoing discussions of what that might look like. I did share my idea of having district rapid response animal welfare teams developing, and that perhaps they might come to the party with some funding to help make something like that happen. For those who aren't aware, I have a bit of a vision of having a mix of vets, farmers, horse community people, all with civil defence training, who could respond quickly to a place like Hammer Springs or some of our coastal communities if they had to evacuate in a hurry, to help manage the animal side of things. And a big part of that, my observations over the last decade have shown many times during disaster events, people risk their lives for their animals. And so I think we need to be more responsible in how we help people look after their animals during disaster events for the sake of human life as well as animals' life.
Subsequent to that, is there any possibility that MPI might ever be in a situation where they could share data I had a conversation with someone in Auckland at LGNZ conference around this and how frustrated they were. There was that resistance from MPI to actually, provide information that would actually make it easier.
Yeah, I couldn't answer that here and now. It's something we'd have to explore. But yeah, happy to talk with you offline for more details.
Look, just a wee comment, just to reassure people, even though we're in the orange there, that Mount Lyford does have an evacuation plan. We just haven't actually done a dry run yet, and needs a wee bit more tinkering. But we are so aware that the OHA situation could be us. And it's a matter of just really taking last few wee things and having a dry run, and I think we should be able to beat Hanmer's time quite easily.
Because you've hardly got anything.
And thank you for all the work Alan has done for our community, because he has done a lot for our community, so thank you.
And just for information, actually, the emergency management bill that's currently being, I can't remember the date, is it 20th? Does it require to be submitted by the 20th? Yeah. The Canterbury Mayoral Forum had a Zoom call or a Teams call about the draft submission. What was identified was the lack of insight from a rural perspective, particularly around lifestyle and farming situations where the crisis of being able to enter properties to get to secure your livestock. So those insights actually have been supported in the document that's been submitted. So I just wanted you to know that the voice of the rural aspect in the event, because I was actually thought about, Mount Lyford at the time when probably when I first met Ross way back then, that how important it was to be able to access and manage that. So yeah. I don't have anything more to say on that, but I just wanted people to know that wasn't lost in that information. Okay. Is there any further questions for Alan today in regard to this update? Thank you. I'll just go back to, we do have a recommendation on page 73 where we received that information. If there's no further questions in that regard, is someone willing to, thank you, Vanessa, happy to move that we receive that information. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Robbie. All in agreement to that, please say aye. Against, it's carried. Thanks, Alan. Really appreciate what you do. Thank you for coming along today. It's always just good to have that chat about all things civil defence emergency management. Thank you. Good stuff. Thank you. We'll leave you sitting down the back there while we carry on. Thank you. Radio councillors, we're tracking quite nicely. And if I can ask, Jason, are you good to go on your financial report? Absolutely. Councillors, on page 80 is the financial report for April.
Right, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the financial report, further in the format has been provided for the 2 months to the end of April, and as normal, we'll just go through it in the 3 key components. First one being the financial report, which is on page 83 through to 107, and again, we'll just focus on the year-to-date figures, but if there's anything that pops up in the monthly, just let me know. So overall on page 83, the stage of the financial year, our total operating revenue was 53 million, as opposed to a budget for the 10 months of almost 51 million, so about 2.3 million ahead. And overall expenditure about 365,000 lower than what we had budgeted for the period.
And capital expenditure overall, we've spent 19.1 million for the 10 months. The budget for the period was 18.7, so we're ahead of the game on getting the capital projects. Based on that, there will be compensating variances that you'll see through the document. Page 84 is the group activity for water supplies. Key variances here, and they will be apparent all the way through. Development contributions, the level of development contributions that we've received has been lower than what we allowed for in the budget. And then a couple of key components with water, just the timing of the rate collection from Waimakariri District Council in respect to the ratepayers on the other side of the boundary. We get that in a clump every 3 months rather than monthly as we record the rest of our rates. Other income is up. There was some recovery of some damage caused by Chorus, and connection fees are actually up in budget for the period. And then expenditure point of view, the employment cost directly attributable to water is lower, but there has been compensating changes and increasing allocation to sewer. The other key variances, as we mentioned earlier in the year, electricity costs are up on budget, and the internal interest charged for water is up on budget, a combination of the higher than average internal interest rates and the balance of the internal debt at the start of the year. I mean, capital expenditure altogether, we're sitting at 6.8 million for water. Our budget for the period was almost 6.8 million. So page 85 is just a roundup of the ETU/transition process, and we've received money towards the transition or towards the Three Waters transition work, which we're chipping away at spending, and that will come to a head at the end of the financial year. Page 86 is sewerage, and again we are lower on budget for development contributions, and overall our operating expenditure is tracking on budget, with the employment costs, as I mentioned earlier, higher than we had budgeted for, just allocating more time to sewer. Our operating expenditure is down, and there is a line item there called sludge management, which we haven't spent the full budget for the period, and our interest costs are over budget. And again, combination of the internal interest rate and the balance of the internal debt. And capital expenditure. Sorry, up top.
Oh, sorry, Jason. This goes for page 86, 87 and 88. And if we look at the bottom line, the total capital expenditure for April for sewage was 195,000, but we were expecting 426,000. For stormwater is 159 as opposed to 415. And in the roading, it's only 92,000 as opposed to 930, substantially lower than we actually budgeted for. Is there any particular reason for those three figures to be so much?
The roading
less
one,
than we
I
expected?
can't specifically comment on it. They're just, but a lot of the other capital projects within Three Waters are purely to do with timing, getting the work done. When we had set the budget, we had estimated what period that the work will be done, and there is accumulation of work in the January, February, March, April period. But some of the work has been done ahead of time, and some of the work may not be done
before the end of the year. And we have actively, I note on page 86, perhaps number 7, the sequencing biological reactor family in the forecast for this financial year and next financial year. It's going to be actually split over the year. So the full budget for that item may not be realised this year, but it is going to flow through into the next financial year. So it is to do with timing, weather events, those sort of things do have effect, are a factor as well. But specifically for the roading, I'm not sure why. Yeah, I can't answer that question, but certainly for the previous period of the year that we've certainly been close to the budget.
So we're unlikely to benefit from those savings, that it will just come out in the wash over the next couple of years.
That's correct. Any there has been underspends identified that we identified during the budget, and they obviously any savings reduces the amount of debt, but that flows through to the next financial year, and then some of those projects looking at them again, we put a large budget in the long-term plan and realise it needs to be split over a longer period than just 1 year. And we do actively do that as part of the budgeting process, and certainly did do that for the upcoming annual plan, where the total capital expenditure budget is significantly lower than what we allowed for in year 2 of the long-term plan.
Thanks.
We've identified those in the forecast.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Well, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to add, probably 2, maybe 3 months ago, I brought a report to council explaining where we were with the capital programme and what our estimations were in terms of carryovers and work that we won't get done. So that was a while ago. So what I'll say is everything's under control, it's all known. And in terms of the roading, the Robin Road South, that hasn't been invoiced yet by the contractor. So when that gets invoiced, that'll catch up with the budget.
Thank you. Thank you. There's 2 conversations going, so I missed that one. Thank you. So perhaps if you carry on, Jason.
Yeah. There will be a process. We did forecast, use that report that Dan talked about, use that as a forecast for the current financial year, and it was always going to be different to what this states, because this states what we had in the budget and in the annual plan. The forecast will be different to that. But even saying that, at the end of June we'll do a wash up. There'll be projects that we had forecast to do by the end of the year that may not be completed, and we'll do a full. There'll be a process to identify those projects to be carried forward into the 25-26 year, over and above what the capital budget that we do currently have. Okay, so stormwater is we're underspent on employment costs and underspent on some of the operating expenditure being compliance and consultants costs for the period. And the capital expenditure is obviously listed there. We're about $250,000 expected to be for the period. Page 88 is roads and footpaths as a group activity, and that's broken down into roading on page 89. And again, it's been identified already. It's just variances in April that will get caught up by the end of the year. But that does have an effect on the subsidy claim, so that's lower than what we've budgeted for as well. Haven't spent the underlying money, we can't claim it from NZTA. Roadside construction on page 90. General footpath maintenance is under budget, and there will be some capital expenditure incurred in the last few months of the financial year. page 91 is coastal hazards. And the operating is purely related to the Amberley Beach foreshore protection project, where we have spent 650 of the original budget of 750. And there is work planned for the climate adaptation work at Mondown Beach, subdivision of the land to provide sections.
I was just wondering, where does the arson shed or the consenting that we required an account for that? Will that come under coastal hazard or what's it come under?
Yeah, it's the planning policy budget. Under consultants, so no, it's not in there, it's coastal.
Ross, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor. Just regarding the Inley Beach foreshore protection fund. And it might be more for Dan to answer, but will that be paid off before it needs renourishing? Because otherwise they'll never get out of debt, will they?
I'm not sure about answering that one. I hope it's all good.
I can give it a stab. No. Not at the current rate they're paying.
Are they aware of that? I mean, they must be, because it's basic maths.
They set the rate and recommend it to us. And that's what they've chosen to do.
In the long-term plan, we did have that balance repaid by the end of the long-term plan, but whether there is a requirement to renourish before that point.
Because historically, how often is it renourished?
Roughly every 7 years on average.
So they're gonna,
Well, they're obviously aware of this, so.
I think it would be sensible to make it clearer, so that they can then therefore consider their rating amounts moving forward.
Yeah, that's, maybe I'll come to you.
They did try
time.
within themselves to increase their rate considerably, but there was resistance and they didn't do it.
Yeah, we certainly haven't allowed for another set of renourishment work in the confines of the 10 years.
So really this whole strategy is at the whim of nature.
Yeah.
And the renourishment process could be shortened or could be lengthened depending on, you know, what we're exposed to. So I think that the beach community had an understanding, I mean, we've got Southfield here, that the debt component was a major factor in this renourishment project. The cost, the expense that they considered. So it's probably not, it hasn't been unsighted, but it's something that needs to be considered, and I'm not sure whether Vanessa or you guys are probably you had your hand up, so maybe I'll go to you.
I was just bounding on from what Ross was said, presumably the maintenance in between, does that still come out of this budget? So, yeah, I guess what you're saying, Ross, is you run the risk of coming to a point when there's a change of direction down there perhaps, and there's an isolated debt left. And who picks it up, I guess is the question. For another day.
So good long-term plan as well.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I was just going to say, you know, the debt was well understood, but I think also there was an understanding and even an expectation or a hope from the beach community that council might be able to assist with some sort of national funding applications. So they've certainly been seeking that from us, but there isn't, I don't believe there's any current available funds from the national direction that would fit the bill.
No, but I'm trying to organise a meeting with Mr. Watts to have a further discussion about what we're doing.
Fantastic. the beach community certainly has concerns around, whether or not some of that that debt could be funded from Ofsted.
Through the chair, I would support its comments and add perhaps that there is an implied understanding from where I stand that current rates is not sustainable long term. And I do think that they've gone into this very much in the hope expectation that there will be funding to help subsidise that.
So I just note in that regard that the beach community were of the view that there was funding available, but they couldn't access it because they don't exist as a incorporated society or anything. And so they're happy for council to apply on their behalf, but they haven't actually indicated at any time where they thought that funding might be available. So it's they're just in a
So, I mean, I guess that this report has just highlighted some of the issues that are known and some of the issues that are remain unknown, actually. So it is holding on us all to just keep a line of sight over this and to see how it progresses really, and if there's any external opportunity, that discussion will be held in the passage of time. But there's no certainty around that either.
No.
So I think that's the reality that we're facing. Yeah. Okay, are you happy to move on, councillors? Thanks, Jason.
92 is a group activity for public services. Two areas, the first one, page 93, community services. The key variance here is the amount of additional grant funding that we've received, and the key programs listed here. Page 94 is property. Two key variances sitting here is other income, and that's largely funding that we've received from the Soldiers Block. And then capital expenditure, and again, the Soldiers Block is ahead of the budget, and talked about providing full wash up on where we are with the funding and the expenditure on the Soldiers Block, so that people coming in the next couple of months. And number 6 there is labelled halls, but it is capital projects that have been completed in Hanmer Springs using funding that was received from the sale of the old staff house. So that's perhaps not quite categorised correctly. So it's not spending money on halls, it's actually spending, you can see there in Brook Dawson Reserve in particular, with funding from that specific fund. And page 95 is reserves. Small variances for the year, but the key capital expenditure item there is under reserves, and in particular that council has settled on the purchase of the neighbourhood reserve in Amberley Township, which was one of the neighbourhood reserves out of the 3 to be funded from the township reserve. The development contribution fund has been purchased.
Yeah, just in regards to that, will there be some sort of public notification or statement?
Yes, I'll be looking for some guidance from the Southwood Committee on their intentions for that reserve. So we can actually go with something fully formed, so we don't get to a situation where people want to change the use of it to some other use.
Would that be done via consultation with the community?
Well, I'll go to the South Board and see what the South Board wants to do. I've suggested once the South Board, but didn't get much response, so I will go there again with formal paper.
Thank you.
That's for that. Yeah, to secure it, you know, so some timeliness factor, like, could we expect it to be next?
Paper have to be done today to get it to the next meeting, I think. So.
June, still a couple of weeks.
Anyway, I mean, yeah, I guess it.
So June or August.
Yeah, okay. I guess messaging is as timely as possible.
Yeah.
Given the short time frame that being July's. So yeah, I think it'd be useful for the community. Thank you.
Through the chair, Hamish, I have wrote an idea with the committee that it's given a loose unanimous support to explore further. So I'm happy to email you those ideas if that gives you any information.
Yes, that would be good.
Thank you. Got an outcome from that one. Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
Okay, page 96 is emergency services, and key variance there is in other direct expenditure where we haven't spent. So like broadband system as Alan alluded to earlier. Page 97 is the library. Key variance there is development contributions, so in that, and again, just relating to the timing of subdivisions and the likes, but for this financial year, we introduced a new development contribution for the eventual extension of the library in 8 or 9 years' time. So page 98 is cost organisation, and the significantly over budget for transfer station charges, but that does include the 68,000 of waste levies that have been received. But transfer station fees themselves are 195,000 higher than what we budgeted for the 10 months. And again, we do have a development contribution here, and that is lower than what we budgeted for, but that was to fund a portion of the expansion of the Amberley transfer station.
Just regarding the waste levy from the Ministry for the Environment, my understanding is that it's X amount per tonne. Or how's that levy, how's that levy that we get back calculated?
I think the levy, no, I have to go back because they're consulting on changing the basis of the levy being paid back. I think it's paid back on a population basis at the moment.
So, I mean, we pay them a levy per tonne.
Yeah, and the bit that we get back, I think, is on population, but I'll have to check that.
Okay, so it's not something that it's a contestable fund that we apply for, or is that a separate?
They have to have projects to do with the waste levy.
Yeah. This is just a refund. Or
no, the money coming back will be for specific.
Okay, so
we do on an annual basis provide an accountability report back to MFA.
Okay.
On the use of the levies in terms of education and other minimisation projects.
Ray, it's like, well, we should have spent the money on something to get that rebate back, but we haven't spent the money because it's sitting in our account.
We generally do spend the money.
Yeah.
We do provide more than what we get the levy for. So it's always, certainly in the last few years, the amount of expenditure of which we put some rate money into as well is higher than what the levies are.
What this report's saying is we've got more back than what we budgeted. Yeah, it's not saying we've got surplus.
Okay, yeah, okay, thank you.
Doesn't it, I mean, Sally or Andrew, if they have a project that actually fits the criteria for that waste levy, will we use that specific project? But I think it's sort of a narrow band of criteria, isn't it, that you can use that funding for? I'm sorry, I'm not more specific, but I'm not sure if we did an ops meeting or something. But yeah, perhaps Sally might, or Andrew might be able to. If there's something that would help with our better understanding, I guess, about the purpose of the levy and the allocation of funding or the project basis that we use it. Maybe if we could just find that out, that might be helpful. Yeah, is that okay, Ross?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Radio.
Okay, the next group activity is page 99, regulatory services, and that's broken down to page 100, which is resource management and planning, and the variances there largely, we've got less consent fees for the period, but we've certainly got less costs involved with both staff and consultancy for the.
So coming back to Vince's question earlier, this is the spreadsheet that you would find where that cost was sitting. Yeah. Yeah, great. Okay. Thank you.
On page 101, it's other compliance and regulatory functions, and this does include building control, which is almost perfectly on budget for the income for the 10 months, and some expenditure items here we've identified earlier in the year that our insurance expenditure is significantly over budget, and specifically in relation to the professional indemnity, which building is a critical part of. Page 102 is the group activity for the thermal pools. Sarah will be here to discuss things after lunch, but for the month of April, total profit or surplus from the pools was 493,000, which is about $110,000 up on what we had allowed for in the budget. But conversely, for the full year, as we've identified, we're about $380,000 down. And in the forecast for the annual plan, we did predict we were going to be about $500,000, but predicted we would be $500,000 lower than what we had allowed for in the budget. Page 103 is a group activity for governance and corporate services, and that's broken down into governance on page 104. No significant variances from the budget for the 10 months. Page 105 is a treasury account, and a few variances there, again, largely dictated by the timing of capital expenditure, internal debt, and how that affects the internal interest received and also internal interest paid. From an external interest point of view, we're about 56,000 higher than we had budgeted for our external interest. Again, that's a combination of the timing of capital expenditure that results in external debt and also the underlying interest rate. But other income we have there, we've got rate penalties at about $40,000 above budget, and external interest received is up on budget by 170,000. So when we do have spare cash, it's just put into a call account and earn some. Sorry. Yeah, Hamish has just pointed out the thermal pulse back on page 102. You see a line item there, Hammond Springs thermal pulses for other income. For the full year's budget, of $1.8 million. That does include 1.62 million relating to the Provincial Growth Fund in funding the portion relating to the fly ride. Now, in May, just over the weekend, I sent a bill for 700,000 as council has met one of the milestones relating to that project. So there will be funding coming back. We most likely won't get the full 1.62 million by the end of June, but certainly, you know, a big chunk of it is we've actually received to offset the costs that we've incurred. But that will come through in the May financial report.
Yeah. Can I just if, because you know, we're in a process of decision making in regards to that project, will we have to pay any of that back if we don't move forward?
No, that was one of the milestones, the conditions that we have met, so it is money that we receive. We only get the money when we meet those particular milestones, so that was one. There's one key one left, and that is, I'm assuming, completion of the balance of the grant, the full. So that's about 900,000 in
Thank you.
Okay, corporate services on page 106, and the key variance there is in respect to employment costs, and that's just the allocation of employment costs overall. We are recording close to $500,000 lower wage costs than we had budgeted for. That's just the way it's allocated from corporate services, and there will be a wash up in there. And the last page there is the earthquake recovery account. And, coupled with the financial report is the full capital expenditure report, which is page 108, 112, and it just lists each of the capital expenditure items into the individual projects, where we sat at the end of April compared to year-to-date budget, and the amount required for the remainder of the financial year, as well as what we're already committed to.
Yep. Questions from councillors on those additional CapEx pages?
So the second part of the financial report is just the rate of arrears report on page 113 and 114. Just a narrative from page 81 of the covering report. At the end of April, the total rates owing to council was 9.3 million, which was at the same point this time last year was 8.6 million, so that's about an 8.6% increase, but bearing in mind that our overall increase was 11%, so we are certainly doing better, and by the end of the year we're certainly expecting the rates to be owing to be a lot less than the just over $1 million that was owing at the end of June 24. The highlight there.
There's actually another 98 people in those money in the bottom. The total one.
Yeah, and there's a bit of that is the natural growth in ratepayers. So if we've got, and because we increase at the start of April, there will be, unless they pay immediately, which not many do, they wait until May to pay, that, yeah, we will have more ratepayers, so that's,
Just picking up on that. The chair, we wouldn't have 100 extra ratepayers now though. And if you make the comparison between now and last year, you know, that's, you know, 100 more people that owe us money almost. And particularly, I mean, I always look at the amount owed, so between 1 and 5,000. You know, that comparative to this time last year is up 400.
Yeah, I would, sort of very, very cautious to look at April in isolation because it's when rates are invoiced, so the full extent of the rates will be owing at that point. May and June are a much better indicator on how indebted we are, how ratepayers are to council at that point.
And I understand that, but in comparing to April last year where we had those same issues to take into consideration, it's not a pretty picture this month.
So that might reflect the portion of ratepayers that are now expected to pay over $1,000 quarterly, where they might have been at 900 last year. So the rates increase has actually bumped up the number of people in that category.
Well, we'll look at
so
the May data and see what that shows us.
I suppose the trends for the full year is that, you know, at certain points we are you know, not the months that we invoice the rates, but certainly the subsequent two months we are lower than what was owing the same point the previous year.
And I think it's certainly a desire, desire from this council is to manage that, you know, and control that setting, I guess, and to ensure it as best we can to ensure that it's tracking in a downward trajectory rather than, you know, continuous increases we've had expected and received in the past. So probably.
Yeah, I mean, debtors are affecting up and down, but particularly the moment. The ones I worry about are that if we get the ones settling right on the bottom, we don't forward on those hardcore ones that are just floating out and not doing something.
Yeah, and there is some work we're doing on those specific ones that we have got. You know, out of all the ratepayers, we've got a hardcore of probably less than a dozen that have got significant amounts outstanding from a number of years, and it's just working that through with them.
Okay. Thanks, Jason.
Okay, the final component of the page report is the treasury report. So that's page 6 onwards. So the key points to note at the end of April, the total external debt that we held was 80.5 million. 69 of that was in term loans with the LGFA, another 10 million was short-term debt with the LGFA, and there was, from a cash flow point of view, we needed to pull down 1.5 million from our Westpac facility, which has since been repaid. The liquidity there sat at 111.25%, so just over the required 110%. And over on the following page, even though it's sort of hitting the all up weighted average cost of funds, including margin, at the end of April was 4.25%. It's about 4 basis points down on the same point the previous month. We do have this niggly wee breach in in one of our interest rate policy bands, which we're just working on and will have a result by the end of June.
You just, for the chair, could I ask, on that page, our blue line seems to be trending above the grey and the ground. Is there any rhyme or reason to that? Just can't see a number of that. Oh, 121. I want to.
That one. So the blue is, our weighted average cost of funds at 4.25%. The current official cash rate is 3.5%, and then the 90-day bank bill rate at the end of April is 4.3%. For quite some time we were on the right side, and that was because we did went through a process of obtaining some hedging, particularly post-COVID when the interest rates were particularly low. As they trailed off, and included in part of that was that one tranche of debt that cost the council 0.88%. That matured in April, so we don't have the benefit of that. So that immediately just, we've replaced it with other debt at much higher rates. So it does help up.
So the purpose of hedging is to smooth the line so you don't get subject to the variations up and down so much. And you have to accept that when you hedge, you will have some time when you're up, some time when you're down. All you're trying to do is smooth your pathway. There's a cost to smoothing your pathway, and that is in times like this. You pay the bank, and other times the bank pays you. And you have a hedging policy that you've set that requires us to hedge. We get the best rates that we can on the day when we take a hedge, and we try and stick within the bounds of that policy. If you want to change that, you could say, no, we're not going to hedge, we're going to ride bareback, in which case you'd follow the lines, but you'd be subject to those ups and downs. So it's entirely up to you, but that's the purpose of hedging, is to smooth that line, and you can see that line's running pretty smoothly.
Yeah.
Dave, have you got a question?
Yeah, I was just backing up Hamish saying that you just got to take it, and if you want to have the policy.
Oh, thank you.
And, I suppose the other item here is that that blue line includes the credit margin that the bank or LGFA charge on top of the interest rate. So most of our debt, we've got a number of fixed rate tranches of our debt, but most of it is floating. And on top of that, there is a credit margin, so it is always going to be more than the underlying market rates.
Thank you.
And so it's the full breakdown of the term debt and our current hedging, and there's page 122, 125. It's the structure of the internal debt, and it becomes more and more permanent as we move forward with the potential change to 3 quarters. But on page 154, we've got the debt from thermal ponds, but also currently the debt, internal debt relating to water supplies is 48 million, to sewer is 11 million, and for stormwater is shade under 3.5 million.
Jason, I'm just trying to work out, we've got total swaps of 38. Is it?
Total swaps of 38.5
We've
million.
got overall liquidity and funding risk, we've got net is 80 million, but then you've got 79 plus the 38 comes more than that.
Yep, we do have, if we look at page 119, we've got the LGFA term debt there. You can see there's a spread of the ones that are on floating rate, and then we've got specifically 5 tranches of debt. 15 million that is fixed rate, so we've embedded the fixed rate portion within the debt itself. So out of that 69 million, 15 million of that is already fixed rate, and then the balance of that is floating rate. So that fixed rate plus the interest rate swaps creates that the overall fixed rate to our hedging profile. And you can see that a lot of that fixed rate was taken in 23 and 24, not 2020 when it was a great deal cheaper than that. And that, as Hamish mentioned, to create that level of certainty, there was a cost there, and currently that cost is more than the prevailing interest rates for the floating tranche of the debt. But conversely, if the rates went up as high as they were 2 years ago, we'll be on the winning side of that.
Thank you. You're done. We've answered a lot of questions as we've gone through each page, so is there any final questions that councillors have in regard to this, receiving this financial report, noting that breach in the policy limit as well, but if that was the case, if someone of the mind to move the recommendation. Thank you, Fiona. So looking at the recommendation on page 80 as written, receiving the report and noting the breach, do I have a seconder for that report? Thank you, Robbie. If there's no further questions, all in agreement with that, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. It probably takes us now to the mechanics perspective, because when we come back, we'll have Sarah, and that will be public excluded. So perhaps if we move into public excluded now, we'll deal with the public excluded immediately after lunch, and then when we come back out, we'll go back into those information items and open agenda. Set. Okay. Someone with that in mind, councillors, what we will do is, someone's happy to move us into PE, assuming that you agree with the threshold of public excluded items, and we'll just hold that PE until we come back in at 1 o'clock, and we'll receive Sarah to do the presentation, and then we'll continue with the PE agenda, and we'll finish off our agenda. So someone of the mind to move us in. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Vanessa. All in agreement to move into public excluded when we come back at 1 PM. All in agreement with that, please say aye. Aye. Thanks, that's carried. Thank you. Dave, we're just breaking now for lunch. We will be back at 1 o'clock for our PE session.
That'll be good. Give my iPad a chance to charge. It goes flat pretty quick. Okay, thank you.
councillors, we're on the home straight, I think, so thank you, and we're back in open agenda. Fiona back on now.
Okay.
You might be good to go. Awesome, so we've just now got our information items, and Karen, can we start with the tourism board update? Thank you.
Excellent. So this is on page 122 of your agenda. Starting there. Probably just the main thing I wanted to highlight there is we've now got a memorandum of understanding in place between the board, the Hurunui Tourism Board, and the Hammersprings Swimming Pools and Spa for a term of 3 years, and that just I guess sets down more formally what the arrangements are between the two parties. I think I asked to have a review of the existing one, and Graham said that they couldn't find one. So I think it's probably one of those things that's just no doubt was agreed at the time, perhaps not formalised, and has probably evolved over time. But certainly the pools do a fantastic job of operationalising pretty much all of our tourism boards, Hurunui Tourism's activities. So that has now been formalised. And the next paragraph there you'll see is the matter we've already discussed earlier in the agenda, and I think the rest of it's just update of day-to-day activity and the delegates' updates. Happy to take any questions or just leave the information you received.
Thank you, Karen, for that report and that update. If you have any questions for Karen? Karen's happy to move. Can I have a second, please? Thank you, Vanessa, that we received that information. All in agreement with that, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Page 135 is the Pools Committee update. Not sure, I'll look to Tom and Vince. We've probably covered off all of that information, and if there's nothing more to report, I'll just take that paper as read. I'm happy to move that to, you could just second that, Tom. All in agreement to that, please say aye. That's carried, thank you. So the next information paper is the Safer Roads paper. The Hurunui Road Safety Committee meeting that was scheduled for last Wednesday actually received a lot of apologies to that meeting at a late date. So Emma had already written her report for the agenda, and so we thought it was worthy of inclusion here, but it hasn't been presented to the Road Safety Coordinating Committee. But rather than it being just left in a hiatus for 3 months, it was probably good information to share of the work that Emma has done on our behalf. If there's any questions that you may have, Graham's happy to take some notes around that, and Emma could get back to us in the fullness of time. So Dave, I don't think there's is there anything else you want to add to that? You're happy? Thumbs up. Perfect, thank you. So is there any questions in regard to that paper? I mean, it would normally come, but at a later date, but yeah, thanks, Karen.
Not a question as such. I was very interested in the separately circulated data that came attached to this report. I don't remember seeing a report like that before. Perhaps there has been, but I found that quite interesting actually, just the way all of that was broken down, and it became easier to see how all of that helps form pictures about presumably some of our road speed settings and all sorts of stuff, behind the scenes. So if it's any help, I'm happy to move the information we received.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, you're right about this information. Sitting on the Regional Road Safety Committee, it also endorses the intersection, speed, alcohol and vulnerable road users for that collective roading responsible strategy. So, but it kind of aligns with some of the issues that
where we sort of focus highly as a district, so that was quite pleasing. So good to note that. Thank you, Karen. Karen's moved that we receive that information. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Vanessa. All in agreement that we receive that information, please say aye. Against, that's carried. Thank you. Perfect. Strategy, Pauline, have an update from your committee.
Yep, sure. So you'll recall that in our long-term plan submission process last year, there were a number of submitters who made comment around rainwater harvesting, particularly with the new builds going on in Amberley. So that came back to the Strategy and Community Committee for consideration to look for a direction to recommend to council. And where we landed on was that there wasn't an appetite for any sort of mandatory forcing of them, but we actually felt like we needed to get a little bit more information about what sort of appetite there was for rainwater collection for watering in the district. And so we're primarily going to look at Henma and Amberley. There was a really good discussion around actually people needing to understand that rainwater, it can't be used for drinking, so therefore it is just for watering. And Dave had some really good stats actually around how much water you would collect and how long that might last. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. Then we had lots of updates on the bylaws, the rapid numbering, climate adaptation, and one from the Water and Land Coordinator. The rapid number plates, they seem to be popping up everywhere now. We've now got 1,102 that have been purchased so far, and 251 of those since the last report. The price has dropped. I'll probably just touch on the submission on the sale and supply of alcohol. So we endorsed a submission in regards to alcohol sales on some of these public holidays. It's just difficult, it's been difficult for a number of our proprietors to have that differentiation between I can open for a meal, but I can't open for a drink. Or another example is like vineyards, you can go for a tasting, but you can't actually buy a bottle to take away. So we just endorsed the submission in regards to changes to that. But any questions, happy to answer them.
Through the chair, when yes, just regarding the collection of rainwater, and we did hear those submissions, and it was more a question that I had come through is that if people are interested, they can do it, but it's mainly that there's no roadblocks from council, like they don't need a consent. Because I think someone thought you did need a consent, but I think in clarify, Hamish might know, but I don't think people need a consent to put a tank in.
We did talk about that, and the report that came to us is very, very fulsome, and there is some requirements for consenting if it's above ground. I'm happy to forward the report for you to have a closer look at. But yeah, we are going to move forward with some workshops to, I guess, explore those issues a bit more and ascertain the appetite in Henma and in Amberley.
Yeah, because there's a numerous amount of ways of storing water. It can actually look like a wall, some of the tanks.
Yeah, the square.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess what I'm getting back to is that there's not a roadblock there that we put in place that makes it hard for people.
Those may depend on the type and size of the storage tank.
Yeah, for sure.
And location. So yeah, I don't think we can blanket say no, you can put in as much water storage as you like, and you don't need a consent because that's not actually right.
Yeah, but there'll, as you say, there'll be some that you wouldn't need a consent for.
Yeah.
And not using it for drinking water, and that would be very hard to monitor.
I think the key thing is that it's not connected to our drinking water system.
Correct. It doesn't mean they're not using it for.
And we did talk about the, resilience around, in an emergency event.
Correct, yeah.
Access, yeah, so, but I'm happy to forward you the report because it was a very fulsome report
Great.
that was provided, and yeah, watch this space, I guess.
Thank you.
I'm happy to move.
Have a second reading for the- Lisa, you want to grab the seats? Thank you. And last but by no means least, Robbie, the operations committee updates. Yep. Thank you.
Our operations committee this time around, no decision reports, but some very good reports. No decision items, but some very good reports. The recent weather event, although it was significant rain, all of our area coped very well. The team were out all over, and they had basically not too many CSIs came out of that, although their most serious one being damage to the Mendon Hills Bridge. There's plans underway. I think we're looking at quite a reasonable repair there. Granny Flats was discussed in the building and a lot of interest around that. It's on the face of it, it sounds like a simple thing, but as it turns out, there is some pretty tight conditions around that with having to meet building code and be built by a licensed master builder. So there's more around that than what we thought. Some very happy people at Leaffield with the new footpath that's for a number of years has gone on down there, and good feedback on the contractor there. On the water, Tamana ROI, the review's out, and the hope was that we've got submission in there, but the hope was that they may relax a wee bit and ease up on some of the smaller schemes, so we'll wait to see what happens there. But the good news item of the whole day is number 15, and I'm going to ask Dan to tell you about that one.
Thank you, Madam
Oh,
Mayor. So we had well, Charlie received a phone call from NZTA saying that there was some available monies and could we make use of them, to which our response was, of course we can. So put in an application, explained all of the things that we wanted to do and how much we wanted. And I've got written confirmation here that came in today at 10:30 this morning, saying that we've been awarded $491,760 on top of our existing programme. So because council already puts in money above the far rate anyway, there's no council contribution, additional monies that needed, so it's an extra 500k that Charlie's just working on the specifics of it right now, but it was largely based around improving drainage and previous repairs underway for next year. That's right.
So that's a significant gain, you know, thanks to work from Dan and Charlie and the team. With that, I'd move that the information be received.
Well done. Thanks, Robbie. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Vince. All in agreement that we receive that information, please say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried.
Just one small correction there, where it says licensed master builder, read licensed building practitioner, LPB, rather than a master builder, the superintendent.
Right. Okay, thanks, councillors. 3:05, and we will draw a meeting to a close. Thanks for your attendance.